When I first started to read Jujutsu Kaisen, the story leading up to Hidden Inventory felt like your generic shonen with some of the most interesting abilities and power systems, which is what kept me reading. You get through Hidden Inventory and start to understand that the story can get dark. It has the potential to tug on your heartstrings. Then comes the Shibuya incident, completely flipping the story on its head and taking you for a spin. I knew I wasn't the only one who felt the emotional impact of the Shibuya incident, and now that the anime has covered the entirety of it, I know anime fans understand the complete turnaround this story made. Jujutsu Kaisen is one of my favorite shonen, period. It has so many facets to it that anyone is able to enjoy, whether it is the power system, world building, characters, storytelling, and much more. In order to understand where I'm coming from, I'm going to be taking you on a deep dive into how Jujutsu Kaisen went from a shonen with your typical story beats to a tragic story about a boy trying to atone for his failures that went against his motivations and goals. I'll be covering the tone shift from season 1 to season 2, the vivid characterization of people between season 1 and season 2, and how the landscape of the story changed the entire forecast for what the story was going to be. This video is going to contain spoilers for the series, but without further stalling, welcome to Jujutsu Kaisen. To start it off, I want to talk about the public perception of Season 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, with major positive reception from a lot of the fan base, which spans about to any anime fan, seeing as how I went to a dentist a while ago and discussed JJK with the guy working on my teeth. Hey, that's kind of fucking sick. When it came to how people received JJK, they liked it a lot, and I mean by an amount that got some of its fans to cultivate a cultish following surrounding one of the minor characters in the story. All that aside, Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the best new-gen shonen, and I think many people would agree with the opinion that it is not a competition. When you look at the story of season 1, it's nice and lighthearted. It has some kick-ass action that is complemented by the slight tension caused by the concrete yet not completely heartbreaking consequences. There's enough stakes to get you to care about the action and missions these characters go on. This is all relative to the story, but there are so many more reasons to love Jujutsu Kaisen from the get-go of season 1. It introduces you to a plethora of characters with a bundle of different abilities. It's like a bouquet of flowers with all sorts of flora. That being said, some are inherently better than others. There are ones that have great balance overall, but others that are situational because of the rules of their power. The show gets you interested in this power system because of its uniqueness and variety of abilities. It makes you think about the power dynamic of the characters in this world. It doesn't leave you bored, and instead of wondering about the infinite potential of these powers. The production of the anime is also very well done. Without diving too deep into the logistical nature of the animation, I want to compliment the animators for the work that they have done. Without these people, Jujutsu Kaisen wouldn't have been realized into a show that was able to fully present the spectacularness and sparkle of these very flamboyant showings. I mean, when you have characters like Todo, who have the imaginative power of a crossfaded stoner taking another tab of acid, you need the talent to bring it into the world. But when you have the amount of love that Jujutsu Kaisen does have, there are always going to be those who want to play devil's advocate. Karma has to be balanced in the world, and these people are the minority of the fan base but the loudest. It's like sitting in the world's loudest room with an amalgamation of loud sounds being played off 2,000-watt speakers. To say it in normal terms, it's full of a bunch of baloney. Case number 1. Certain people say that the story is lacking in many ways. It has no substance and is your typical run-of-the-mill shonen. Funny how they say this, because a lot of these reviews are run-of-the-mill elite haters. Some may be genuine, but I promise you others are not entirely sure of even their own thought process. It's like they're throwing shit at the wall and seeing if it sticks with the community. They never provide reasons as to what the standard shonen formula is, which I assume they attribute to shows like Blue Exorcist and Fire Force, other shonen that are popular but not nearly as critically acclaimed as stories like Jujutsu Kaisen. But another branch of pathing these thoughts can take is that it copies other supergiants out there. A comparison that was made about the story of JJK is that it is identical to Naruto. They come up with all these convoluted reasons for their take, and despite wanting to be constructive, they make it seem like they're an amateur comedian at a stand-up bar that gets crickets during their punchlines. It is truly a sight to see the ramblings of a madman. They'll make side-by-side analysis of the characters that fit the same archetype, but the way they deliver the message comes off as childish and like they were writing this review up after getting mad at the adaptation and taking lacking a drive to clear their own head. Case number 2. The characters in this anime are said to have as many dimensions as an acrylic stand. Instead of breathing, living characters in an expansive world of curses, people say that the characters are equivalent to poorly printed out stills with the framework of a recently firebombed house in the suburbs. It is insane the extent that these people will talk to prove their point that the characters do not develop past the beginning of the story, and any development that is done on any of the characters doesn't result in anything. My takeaway from this point is that these anime fans have a child's brain that doesn't know what patience and object permanence is. Yuji haters will talk about how soulless and generic he is, but now remember the important facts of episode 1 and disregard them as scapegoats. If you are going to complain about why Yuji is motivated to take on the role of a Jujutsu sorcerer, then how about you take your eyes off of the screen, look at yourself in the mirror, and think about your own grandfather on their deathbed, and be impactful if my granddad told me to do something as his final wish for his grandson. If you don't get what I'm talking about, you might be an undiagnosed psychopath, but that's an entirely different issue. Anyhow, fix your family issues, and I think you might be able to have empathy for what Yuji went through, having his grandfather die and then being thrown into the world of Jujutsu. Case number 3. The progression of the anime as a whole doesn't set it apart from other anime and actually detracts from the story. The power system is something that a lot of fans praise from the get-go, but of course there have to be people who enjoy the power system in Darling in the Franxx more than they do in a properly polished shonen. The ridiculousness of the power scaling and the enemies the main characters face in the show make people recoil with the fact that lower grade curses might as well be null in the fact that they are never the main problem. It always has to be a higher grade curse. There's actually a reason for this being the case, that being that the world has to be balanced between sorcerers and curses. That's why there are so many high grade curses in existence, all because of the existence of Gojo. I guess we didn't know this at the time that season 1 aired, but that just goes to show the lack of patience that some haters don't have for a show that isn't even bad if you aren't aware of this fact. There's also the problem that the cast of main characters are scaling incredibly well from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. They're saying this, but these are people who watch anime with the pacing of One Piece and Naruto and are expecting a good 100 episodes for the main cast to reach their next peak of power. No shit to One Piece though, that manga is good as hell, but Naruto might be another story. To me, it seems like the haters of the new gen shonen are people who I would describe as anime hippies. They love a lot of the older stuff, hence why there are so many comparisons between Jujutsu Kaisen and Naruto, and they think to themselves a lot, oh, do you remember when anime was good? It's like that trend that went around where people would make videos titled modern gaming is boring, but they only watch or consume one type of game like FPS live service games. It blows my mind how close-minded some people can be, and it's not as easy as using a can opener to get it open. You need a whole battering ram and trebuchet to bust open that thing. My unfiltered opinion about Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1 is that it is the beginnings of a deeper story under the facade of a generic shonen. At the beginning, you have the proper showing of the power system between the new sorcerer, an old ancient curse, and today's top tier sorcerer. The arc with the cursed womb shows you that the main characters aren't invincible. The arc with Junpei being toyed with and ultimately giving Yuji a reason to hate the people who he is up against are all the marks of the beginning of what would soon turn into a night of tragedy and conflict that would never be forgotten in Jujutsu history. Oh, and also in shonen history, I guess, seeing as it was one of the most anticipated sequels in recent anime history. Like, you don't see anyone getting hype over Blue Exorcist Season 3, that's all I'm saying. The tournament arc came in after that, and it's considered to be the most generic that the story gets. But like, who doesn't love a good tournament arc in their shonen? If done correctly, it can be some of the most insane action in the story. Seeing some of your favorite characters work together and against each other puts the power system in the spotlight and brings whole dreams of fans to life, seeing their favorite characters doing what they do best. What a lot of anime onlys don't realize though is that there are undertones of foreshadowing going on throughout the tournament. The first one I want to point out is that Yuji is being targeted. The headmaster at the Kyoto school wants Yuji dead because he is one of the seniors in the Jujutsu world who is against the postponement of the execution of Yuji in the first episode. It starts off as a mission to target and destroy Yuji, but the Tokyo school realizes this quickly and splits up the Kyoto school forces into one-on-one battles to divert attention from Yuji and make it an even playing field, one where Yuji does not end up badly injured or dead. The second one that I want to point out is the appearance of Hanami. It can be seen as just a bad guy interrupting and causing a disturbance during a celebration of the main cast every day, but the plot is thickening alongside the disturbance. Hanami is a distraction for the rest of their allies to go in and steal the Sukuna fingers that the Tokyo school has in their possession. This is something that plays a huge part in the second season of JJK, but we'll get into that later. later. Hanami isn't the only thing they have to worry about, but Hanami is the thing that is standing in the way of them and the real objective of the villains. Hanami is a disaster curse. She's incredibly strong when it comes to the power system. Her abilities can prove to be fatal to most people if they can't find a way to avoid it. That's why it takes people like Todo and our natural prodigy Yuji to take matters into their own hands and brain blast their way through Hanami's offense and defense in order to defeat her. Mind you, it took the entirety of the rest of the cast to hold off Hanami from killing any of their forces. This is how powerful she is and how much of a threat she poses to the Jujutsu world. It also goes to show that Yuji and his group of friends really have improved from the time that they started, and it is amazing to see the differences in power between the individual students. Todo is an anomaly of power and IQ, as said by himself, when it comes to ability, talent, and battle sense. Gojo says the same thing about Yuji, giving us much promise and hope that Yuji will be the one to prevail on top. The story does well to build up its world and power system, but also construct its characters in a way that is likable. I don't think there is an unlikable person among the group of sorcerers who we call our heroes. Between the students and the alumni of Jujutsu High, they are always there to defend the world from evil in the end, and don't take for granted the lives of humans. Geto is another anomaly though, seeing as he took the route of being a Jujutsu supremacist. But it isn't the rule that all sorcerers are bound to turn evil against the world. Almost all of them fight to keep the peace of the world, whether on a societal level or in a personal manner. The alumni of the Jujutsu world are well-developed adults who want to make sure the world stays oblivious and safe from the curses of society. While they may have their hands in all sorts of different pots, they do want the same thing at the end of the day. It's just the difference to which they achieve that goal, which is shown in the opposition between Gojo and the higher-ups. He is building up an army of students who will be as powerful as him to eventually create a turnaround in the Jujutsu world balance of power and the way things get done. The higher-ups want to be fully in control and thus want to keep Gojo in check, which is the reason why the elimination of Yuji was a priority, despite them coming to terms that they would postpone this execution until he has fully eaten all the fingers of Sukuna. The higher-ups are truly whiny children who haven't grown a sense of how to compromise. The students of the Jujutsu schools don't know much about these political battles. They do, however, hold the same goal of keeping the world safe from the curses that plague Japan. They all have different motivations, as is the case for many of the adults in the different clans and upbringings. They have extremely different outlooks on what a Jujutsu sorcerer should do, which goes to show how well the characterization of the many people are in this show. Maki is one of my favorite characters in the series. Not only does she subvert all expectations that people place upon her, but she is someone with an iron will and persistence when it comes to eliminating the evil of the Jujutsu world. She's not afraid to get her hands dirty. If it means killing another person in order to survive, then she will cut through them and move forth to a new tomorrow. I feel like I'm describing an Edo period samurai when I talk about Maki, because she's just that sick in my mind. She is extremely athletic and competent when it comes to fighting, which helps when she's been studying Jujutsu nearly her whole life. She has a reason for being stubborn, having been raised in the Zenin clan and berated for being a failure of the clan. The building up to these characters begins from the time that we see them, and it continues through to the current state that the manga is at. Megumi is another character who builds up and develops his worldview through his experiences. At first, he was very prone to self-sacrificing when it came to the point of saving one of his allies. He wanted to get the best possible outcome in a situation, even if it meant that he had to give up his own life. However, if this was going to be the case, then he will put everything on the line before giving up. His skills develop to match that fiery courage of his. Like a gas leak that results in the blazing fireworks of a middle-class house, Megumi develops at an alarmingly fast rate. There isn't a time during the series that he isn't learning. He adapts and is able to think up of new strategies for whatever curse or sorcerer that he is facing. He has an adept arsenal at his hands, and he employs it to its maximum proficiency. In short, he is the giga nerd of this shonen series, but it's ultimately wicked sick when it comes to throwing hands. Yuji is the main character of this series, and I just want to touch on the little things that goes on in Yuji's mind throughout the span of the first season. He is thrown, chucked, punted out of the stadium of being a regular high school boy and into the world of life and death and battling curses that threaten humanity. He takes it upon himself to save as many people as he can while he is still alive, consuming Sukuna's fingers and destroying evil curses. I want to point out that Yuji is 15 at this point. When I was 15, I was playing Minecraft and CSGO. In no way was I thinking of some grand goal that I wanted to achieve in my life. That's a heavy weight to carry on your back whilst going through your day. Yuji has a successful run in with a low tier curse, dies by the hand of his arrogance and lack of power, gets brought back to life with a stronger fervor of dedication to his goal of becoming stronger to save more people. He experiences failure of saving a life during the Junpei arc, and thus only solidifies Yuji's motivation missions against the villains that he is facing. He wants to grow stronger like many protags in the shonen genre, but he has a pure-hearted, innocent glow about him that tells you that he means what he says and fully believes that him and his group of allies will be able to stop what comes their way. He trains during the school tournament arc and makes friends with new allies. With these new connections comes more proficient learning, and that is how he manages, alongside Megami and Nobara, to take down the Cursed Womb enemies during the finale of the season. The first season ends off on a successful mission, and this bodes well for the future of Yuji and his allies. Yuji is learning more in every encounter, and he shows potential for what Gojo wants him to be. He might be able to achieve his goal after all. These characters couldn't have been written so well without the world building and power system. The stories of the curses and how inherently evil they are builds well into the good-natured heroics of our main cast. They're both strongly opposing sides, giving the story well-decided sides of good and evil, but still enough leeway to give our heroes a choice to do things the way that they want to do it. This will be very important the further we get into Jujutsu Kaisen. The power system is something else that helps establish how characters think of themselves and about others. In the beginning, Yuji and other characters are distraught by how weak they are compared to the higher grade curses. By the end of the season, they close this gap by an extraordinary amount, and it gives the characters, every one of them that made developments to their combat and technique, confidence in themselves and the mission they are carrying out. It gives the chance for characters to make more risky decisions in order to accomplish what they believe is right. These things work hand in hand to develop the breathing world of Jujutsu sorcery, and it gives very little flaws to be hung up on. When I read JJK and watched the anime afterwards, I was immersed both times because of the production of the show and the thought that goes into building the characters, their relationships, their balance of power, and the environment around them. That is also why it hurts so much more when Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 aired its first episodes. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is a tonal shift like no other. If you've seen the new season, then you know why Chainsaw Man, Hell's Paradise, and JJK are considered the Dark Trio. In Dennis Man, shit hits the fan so many different times that it is impossible to count all the convoluted, fucked up things that Tatsuki Fujimoto forced onto these characters. Hell's Paradise is something that starts off with absolute madness and doesn't let up at all through the whole season. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is a mix between its two other brother anime. While it doesn't start the anime like it's hitting you with the high-speed moving train, it does get off to a strong start and keeps exceeding your natural limit of handling ludicrously horrendous things. That's why I feel bad for people who wait for whole anime seasons to come out so they can binge them. Instead of shooting yourself in the foot once a week, you're taking about 17 stab wounds in the chest when you binge the entirety of the Shibuya Arc, which is what coincidentally happened with me in the manga. It wasn't a pretty sight afterwards, I'll tell you that much. From what I understand, people agree with this sentiment. That's why JJK earned its stripes as one of the Dark Trio. While the first season takes its time to let you understand the fundamentals of what makes this world special, Season 2 demonstrates the world's merciless brutality when it comes to the consequences and stakes. There's lots of ways that we can go with this, but let's start with Hidden Inventory, a story of preemptive celebration that caused the downfall of our lovable cast of friends. When we started the Hidden Inventory arc, it was literally a blast from the past that I thought was going to show us some of the development that we missed out on by seeing the current state of power of Gojo. He had nearly reached his full potential by the time of Shibuya, so it's safe to say we only got to see him towering over his enemies. That was also the case in Hidden Inventory, but not because he was at that power level, it was due to his inflated ego and arrogance to learning from the rest of the world. Ever since Gojo was a kid, he's always been kind of a brat. He likes to joke around and he does genuinely believe that he is the strongest ever since he was born. There's a natural energy around him that causes low-tier enemies to scatter and more powerful enemies to take their place to balance out the power in the world. There is a good reason for this, because when you compare Gojo to your average grade 1 sorcerer, it was like comparing a hydrogen bomb against a coughing baby. It was because of this though that Hidden Inventory is all the more of a wake-up call for the fans of Jujutsu Kaisen, but as well as the characters in the story. Gojo gets faced with a power equal to his. Toji is the person who first killed Gojo Satoru. He ended up killing Riko and wounding Geto. It wasn't even a close match match because Toji took advantage of his circumstances and his enemy's environment. He's the strategist of a hitman, but also has enough power behind him to back up these plans and tactics. He is truly an outlier that could change the power balance of the Jujutsu world. When all these terrible things happen at once, a certain shock and disbelief comes over you as you're watching this. The characters who were once sharing laughs and walking down the beach of Okinawa just the day before have all been folded flat like your grandpa's rusty lawn chair. There isn't much to be said in the moments when this is sitting with you other than feeling astonishment. This is the beginning of what would become a new age for Jujutsu sorcerers and the fans of the series. It was the beginning of what would brand the series as one of the Dark Trio. I don't think anyone who had been watching season 1 from the beginning and had been waiting for season 2 were ready for this tragedy. There's one thing I want to tackle that I don't think a lot of people tend to give much thought to, which is the emotions of the characters in JJK. From hidden inventory, we have Riko, Geto, and Gojo. For Riko, it must have been scary to have been suddenly taken away from her school life, but it isn't something that she wasn't expecting. Nonetheless, knowing that the life you've known is going to end and your soul will no longer be on the living plane is a scary thing. When faced with death, people who hold regrets and desires will cling on to life. When you're presumably 14 years old and still in school, there's a lot that you want to do with your own life and the friends around you. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 14. It doesn't help that Riko had already made friends with Gojo and Geto as well. When Riko is told that she doesn't have to swap souls with Tengen, there's a joy that comes up out of her that's been stuck inside of her ever since the beginning of this arc. It's a relief to her knowing that she'll be able to see all of her friends again and do everything that she wanted to do. For this to be taken away in such a sudden but surefire way is something that breaks Geto because he got to witness all of this buildup with her away as she laid dead on the ground in front of him. Geto is someone who still has heroic values in him during this point. Having made friends with Riko makes him want to avenge her. There aren't many words that need to be said between Geto and Toji. Their intentions are clear. Toji is here on a mission and Geto is trying to deliver some self-proclaimed justice. This conflict doesn't draw itself out and finishes promptly with Toji winning the encounter. Without anything to show for his grief and sorrow just yet, Geto is left underneath the Tokyo Jujutsu school with regrets larger than any of us may know. We'll get back to Geto in a little bit, but first I also want to tackle how Gojo must have felt in these moments. I think it's pretty evident like he had steam coming out of his ears, but let's break it down. Gojo putting down his guard after they've reached the school is the start of this all. Before this, he had thought that they had completed the objective and that they were safe in the confines of their home. It was here that Toji got the first strike in on him, and Gojo's world would change drastically. Many people would say that this battle was super cool and truly showed the full ability of Toji when he is in his zone. However, I want to talk about what might have been going through Gojo's head. Seeing as his abilities mean that nearly no one would have been able to normally land a hit on him, having been injured on the startup of the battle was debilitating. He didn't know who this person was, but he had to know that because of this injury he has sustained, it must be someone strong enough to know how he fights. The fight moves on with Gojo doing his best to gain the upper hand again. However, Toji can see right through Gojo's foresight and make a mad dash straight up to him and finish him off. The bloody sight was so graphic that Toji had assumed that Gojo was done for. That would be true for anyone else who Toji would have gone up against. However, it was during this moment that something in Gojo had awoken. This is one of the earliest times we know of where we get to see the unbridled emotions of Gojo. Some people would call him insane with the way he acts when he walks up to Toji after having been killed, like he's just eaten a nerd's rope edible all by himself. Others would call him enlightened, as he literally quoted an iconic line from Buddha's birth. It's a whole array of emotions that comes out of Gojo in the moment, and his only mission at the time was to eliminate the threat that took him and his friends out. We get to see this happen, and the real heartbreaker for me is the aftermath. In the middle of the crowd while walking Riko's dead body down the hall, with the opposition against the star plasma vessel applauding her death, Gojo says a line that I don't think any true hero would have ever said. He suggests killing everyone in the room who had supported the death of Riko. This is a lot to take in, as the media that we're used to seeing usually has good guys detesting bad people, but not to the point of mass murder. In my opinion, it's very potent in the anime, especially in shonen, when a character loses all filters and safeties and thinks about being the next Punisher. It's psychotic behavior, but as all the anime in the Dark Trio tend to think, the only people who could ever exist in their worlds are those who are crazy. I would call them maniacs even. In Chainsaw Man, Denji is willing to bet limb for limb to protect the life he wants when he's not even sure about what it is he truly wants. In Hell's Paradise, Sagari and Gabimaru go through so many psychological processes and relive trauma in such a short period of time that it influences their actions greatly. I think we learned something about Gojo here that gets brought back back up during Shibuya. We also learn a lot about the people of the Jujutsu Kaisen world. In this world, there are people with pure-hearted motivations like Yuji who will stick to their strict beliefs and accomplish their objective at the same time. Then you have someone like Gojo who is willing to do what it plausibly takes to take down the enemy in front of him. To get back to Geto, he wasn't completely unharmed. Like Eve getting tricked by the snake, Geto gave in to the evil inside of him after the Star Plasma Vessel incident. It wasn't that alone that broke him, but it was the initiator. Many of the missions after that had left him wondering what it was Jujutsu sorcerers were fighting for. Trying to find meaning in this career, he eventually came around to the bad ending, if the bad ending meant being public enemy number 1. It makes sense though. These characters were teenagers at this time, and being at such an impressionable age while having all the independence that you could ever want does bad things if your mind is in shambles. Add on to that what seemed to Geto to be a never-ending cycle of suffering and life-threatening situations. With enough time to linger with his thoughts, Geto was able to come to a conclusion that was polarizing compared to his previous standing. Geto comes to a standoff with Gojo in terms of mentality, and that is the end of their relationship. Not to get too deep into this, but the next time in chronological sequence we see Geto is during the JJK Zero movie. This is when Geto enacts his plan into action and goes against the school of Jujutsu sorcerers. His plans fail and he ends up being killed, but his efforts and determination don't die off. It gets inherited, but with the consequence of losing any human emotion he may have had during this time in his life. It means a lot for the plot of the story, and I'll explain in a little bit what it means for his motivations to live on without anything that made Geto human. For being such a short amount of time in the second season, Hidden Inventory was the prologue to our tonal shift in the JJK story. If you watch Hidden Inventory and thought that you were going to have a panic attack, get ready to have a heat stroke, heart attack, hundreds of pinched nerves activate all at the same time during Shibuya. I'm saying this because the story really does scale the intensity to 200 real quick. In terms of public perception for Shibuya, manga readers claim this to be the craziest arc in terms of shonen history. There isn't another arc in anime where so much happens in such a short amount of time, both in terms of airing episodes and in the world of JJK. The Shibuya incident happens over the course of a few hours, and it really embodies the idiom of a lot can happen in 3 days, much less 3 hours. Tonal shift and status quo are our two important terms for what happens in Shibuya. Not only does the story in Jujutsu Kaisen insanely shift from a generic story to one of deep grief and sorrow, but when you're looking at the dark trio compared to all other shonen, these stories get a lot more done in a few dozen chapters than other stories do. It's not to say that the other stories are bad, but it does show that these new gen shonen are influencing a wave of creatives to consider making their stories intense. It doesn't have to be batshit insane like literal terrorist attacks every 10 chapters, but it has to create meaningful change in the world and characters, not just the story. It's like if you play Follow the Leader and one group's leader is a blind man with a cane. You're going to want to be on the side with the person who has well-adjusted sight and is able to get results more efficiently and with better accuracy for perfection. With that being said, I want to tackle the characterization of different people during Shibuya and the emotional impact this arc has had on fans and myself personally because of its quick-mannered story beats. The first character I want to talk about is Megami, because while it may not seem that he got a lot of screen time during the Shibuya incident, there was significant change about how he thinks of his role in the Jujutsu world and how he conducts himself according to these new ideals. He's gone from a soldier wearing a suicide vest to just a maniac with a fondness for ordnance. Megami was always someone who wanted to get things done quickly. He is a hustler. His fight with the sorcerers protecting the veil was proof of this, but it was his next encounter that would show his real growth. After he broke into the domain where his allies were fighting Dagon, Megami immediately started to put his plan into action so that his friends could escape. He knows that this is a dangerous situation for him, therefore looking for a way where they could gain an advantage or even an equal footing to the curse they were fighting. A quick conversation occurs between Megami and Nanami. They were discussing their plan to execute their escape from the domain and turn it into an even playing field. When Nanami told him, knowing this is how Megami acts, to not think about sacrificing himself so that they could escape, Megami acknowledges this. He acknowledges it and tells Nanami that he understands that isn't what the people who have trained them would want from him. He understands his role in all of this and knows he has to fight and stay alive so that he can keep protecting innocence and defeating curses. This is something I know everyone won't make a note of when it comes to everything that happens in Shibuya. I mean, a lot of stuff happens during their time in the train station and outside in town. Expecting everyone to take note of this is like expecting anyone to listen to the speed limit on the highway. It's something that I have picked up on though while ruminating about all the events leading up to this point and afterwards. This development Megumi has made to his mindset has a lasting effect, and I believe it will never leave him for as long as he is alive. He will continue to keep on living if it means he can save more people. I think he gained this idea from the new companions he has made in the world of Jujutsu, and it shows great growth in his development. The only time where it becomes self-sacrificing is when he knows he is in his final stand. After his fight with Toji and being snuffed out by Haruta, he summons Maharaga as a last-ditch effort to take care of his enemy. He had no idea that this would be the fight that would decimate all of Shibuya. He wanted to take care of the enemy in front of him, and knowing he was in no condition to fight, he had summoned his trump card to take care of the enemy, knowing that it was overkill while also acknowledging that it was the only thing he could do to ensure the elimination of Haruta. Megumi does a lot in Shibuya while not being there for half of the engagement, but there are other characters we can look at who are the same. Gojo was someone who we knew of as a calm, collected individual who was powerful enough to wipe off entire civilizations off the face of the earth. During the hidden inventory arc, we know what he is capable of when pushed to his limits and what he is willing to do during these moments of desperateness. I mean, he almost tried to use hollow purple in a crowded metropolitan area. He can get freaky when his emotions are at a high. It was during Shibuya that we got to see this another time and learn about the type of person that Gojo is. Gojo walked into a trap knowing full well what he was doing. He was not afraid of being put on the ropes of the fight and sacrificing what might be necessary in order to win the fight. The curses thought otherwise. They knew that Gojo wasn't an exact copy of Yuji when it came to ideals and motivations. They both want to protect and save as many people as they can, but the extent to which they keep believing that sentiment is not the same. That is what they wanted to pull out of Gojo, but it seemed like they underestimated the powers of Gojo and how he'd be willing to upkeep the bare minimum in his mind. He showcased an excellent demonstration of Jujutsu skills, one that only he could do at this level. It's Gojo after all, he's the Goku of this verse. The only difference between Goku and Gojo is that Goku has already blown up planets in the past. Gojo is not at that pay grade. We learn that Gojo is willing to take risks. Yuji would never put a single life out of commission, but Gojo knows what he needs to do. The adrenaline is rushing through him as he takes care of the mess that the curses have made. The world seems to slow down as he's rushing through the crowd, eliminating curse after curse. After the frenzy has ended, it almost feels as if the world accelerates when Geto comes out of nowhere and greets Gojo. This is a big plot point that is a lot more emotionally churning than I think most people think. Gojo seeing his dead friend come back to life in that moment causes him to relive years worth of memories in his mind while standing there for the couple of seconds that he was still. It's what causes him to get caught by the prison realm and how Geto gains the upper hand in the Shibuya incident. Gojo makes his thoughts on the matter clear. Gojo realizes that it shouldn't be possible that Geto is alive. He killed Geto back last year and it must have been haunting him for all this time. I won't say anything about what their relationship was like, but it must have been something special for Gojo to be what I can only imagine to be as a combination of shocked, astounded, and a little happy. It's just a shame that this feeling doesn't last long at all. He gets caught in the prison realm and he immediately falls into a rage, having recovered from his momentary respite and figured out that there is no possible way for Geto to have lived. That is when it is revealed to us that something else is controlling Geto's body. This is what I meant when Geto had died, but his motivations and goals had continued to live on. This thing controlling him had taken succession of these things and has the capabilities to perform the feats Geto couldn't, because it is much wiser and much more prepared. Gojo is calling out to the imposter, saying that he shouldn't be in Geto's body. He must have been feeling disgust, knowing Geto's body had been violated in such a way and left without a proper resting place. This feeling of repulsiveness to this foreign being must have been overpowering the feeling of defeat for having been captured. That's not what was on his mind at that moment. For Gojo, having that moment of slight joy be whiplashed so badly into a state of rage must have been horrible. I can't imagine what it's like. That was the state Gojo was in going into the prison realm, and it might be a long time until we see him in any state again. I feel like a character we have to touch on is Nanami. He is someone who mentored Yuji on one of his first missions and became someone who was a very close comrade to Yuji. I know many JJK fans feel very personally about him because of all the thirst traps we got of him. We know from the first seasons that Nanami likes to get things done. He doesn't like it when his enemies escape and have the possibility of causing more havoc in the world. As a grade 1 sorcerer, he's able to back up these goals and perform astoundingly. However, the Shibuya incident was a plan like no other. A plot from cursors and sorcerers who had been setting up a trap for as long as the main series has been going on. It would have been difficult for him to expect this to be just like any other mission. He was prepared to go all out, which we see him do against Dagon. That battle was one that took a team of sorcerers to take out a curse and an unexpected interruption from an outsider. It was a battle of surprises that few could have seen coming. He shows a fiery passion to win this conflict, but this is not the main encounter I want to focus on. I want to talk about the aftermath. Nanami gets badly injured after the Dagon fight as a result of Jogo finding them, and I don't mean like a scratch or two. Half of his body had gone up in flames and he was barely holding on to his consciousness walking through the subway. It's like me whenever I'm asleep and smell a freshly baked pie, but in a much more grotesque state. He finds himself in a horde of transfigured humans and has to fight them all. One thing that the anime does that the manga doesn't do is present that scene in such a fulfilling light. What I mean is the imagery of Nanami being free. He got to go to Malaysia. He is frolicking in the sunlight next to the beach where he is able to be free. I think it goes well with his imminent death that is inevitable because it's the contrast between his dying moments fighting enemies and the blissfulness of passing on. I'm also interested in Nanami's emotions. Obviously, he's exhausted, tired to the point where he is having these delusions of being in Malaysia, already having passed on, but he's still in Shibuya. He wants everything to be over, but is doing his best to make sure he does his part in all of this. He is doing as much as he can before his time is up. While he is completely burnt out at this point, I think his fighting shows his determination to the cause of keeping everyone safe. He's the same as a lot of the sorcerers in this case, but Nanami has always come back to Jujutsu when all is said and done. He wanted to retire one day. He wanted to sit in a cabin by the beaches and read books and bathe in the sunlight. He didn't want to be a Duck McScrooge. He just wanted a simple life. But before all that, he had to complete these missions and do his part. He wanted to leave his footprint in the world by saving innocents, the people around him, and those who may not have seemed important to him, but that he does cherish in some way. He had inspiration in him to do all this, and I think that makes him one of the most heroic characters in the story. I could go on about many of the emotions he could have been feeling during his death, like his want of not trying to curse his childhood best friend during his passing. But the main point to take away is the bliss contrasted by the last efforts of a bleeding soul. Someone else who I could amount that to as well is Nobara. She is one of the main cast of the show, so her death is something that I believe caught many people off guard. It's not something your typical shonen story would do midway through the entirety of it. But before that, let's go back to season 1 Nobara. Coming from buttfuck nowhere, Nobara was excited to see the sights of Tokyo, and she was prepared to go on trips and everything associated with typical high school life in the city. She loves the idea of so many people being in one place who are all different and doing so many different things. I would be too if I hadn't grown up in possibly the most overcrowded city during my childhood. For Nobara, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to come here from out in the countryside. That didn't mean she was going to neglect her duty of being a sorcerer. She fought and she grew stronger. She trained and she grew more powerful. She fought more and grew. The potential for Nobara was going to be going off the charts soon, and circumstances were looking up for Gojo and his plan to upend the abusive Jujutsu world. However, nobody could have planned for something like the Shibuya incident to have happened when it did. Nobara was severely underpowered when it came to fighting the enemies in Shibuya. Geto and his team of cursed spirits and sorcerers were mostly top brass, and this meant that the Jujutsu schools would need people of grade 1 or equal to handle the most encounters. Nobara had a difficult time dealing with Haruta, which amounted to a stroke of unluck on Nobara's part, and Haruta's good luck paving the way for him. She lost her ones due to a solar flare hitting her PC mid-comp match. There was a stealing of resolution though. Nobara knew what she had to do. She felt that she couldn't retreat and leave behind everyone else who was giving their all. She didn't know what would happen to her friends while she was recovering, and they were fighting what she could only imagine as even worse dangers than what she had already faced. That is is why she went back out into the battlefield that was Shibuya that night and didn't look back once to question her motivations of taking out the evil taking over the city. Her vigor going back into Shibuya that night was as strong as it could be. She faced Mahito, who was a cursed spirit stronger than any other one that she had faced. Many people would flee at the sight of a danger incomprehensible to them, especially one that they know can take them out just through a single touch. I think Jujutsu Kaisen was trying to show us how much of a strong-willed woman Nobara was, and similar to many of the other female characters in the show, highlighting their strength and pridefulness as people. It's something I think a lot of anime lack, and it's just another reason to love JJK overall. Back to Nobara, her abilities are able to match her confidence. She isn't a pushover like some people may make her out to be, aka my gremlin younger brother, but that's besides the point. I think she could have dealt with Mahito in a safe enough manner and avoided being touched, but the plan Mahito had hatched came to be, and he mixed up Nobara in the subway system. This was the moment I knew, and many people had come to find out that JJK was not messing around when it came to progressing the story. As Nobara was facing her final moments in the show, we get to see the portions of Nobara's past and what makes her who she is today. It's an interesting story to see because we learn that Nobara is the same as she's always been. In Tokyo, she just has more opportunities to be herself and indulge in the things that make her happy, whether it be crushing opponents or culling her wardrobe. It's the change in setting that allowed Nobara to go full out with her personality and how she was able to garner growth so quickly during a short time in Tokyo. At the end of it all though, it wasn't her fiery personality that came crashing through and giving one last good hit in on Mahito. She looks at Yuji and looks fulfilled. She likes the life that she's had up until this point, and it makes no sense to her to go out in a burst of flames. She looks at Yuji with a smile, says what she wants to say, and then passes on. In her final moments, Nobara was sentimental to a point where it felt out of character, but it was the only point in the story where she was able to showcase that side of herself to Yuji and the audience. It felt right to her in the moment, and I think it was a beautiful moment in displaying the depth of character building that the manga amasses as its world grows and gets bigger with every encounter. I've talked about some of the characters that have had their progression shown through the series. They blossom into beautiful moments that some may have overlooked or that some may have just misunderstood for something else. Either way, I think after all that discussion, it's time to talk about our main character, one who is often overshadowed by others in the moment, one who isn't the most powerful in his universe, but one whose story inspired me to make this video. It's a running joke in the Jujutsu Kaisen community that Yuji is not the main character of his own story. He's always left lagging behind the rest of the stronger, more powerful cast, and there's a lot that happens while he isn't around. It feels like the world is moving on and he's being left whether he likes it or not. Same as how you might be scrolling TikTok for 1 hour and a whole week has passed. I think I share this sentiment to a degree, but I'll explain why it's different for me. In my opinion, lots of people have lost hope in Yuji doing anything meaningful for the story at the point we're at in the manga, and I don't think this will be true at all. I think that Gege cares a lot about the world of Jujutsu Kaisen and wants to develop that alongside the conflict as his main priority. But at the end of the day, Yuji is the main character of JJK. He's not just some grunt who gets his shit beaten and that's it. He does enough in the series to warrant him being the main character of the story, but I think the more important piece to his person is that he is unmoving in his character. He believes in his ideals and does everything he can to stick by them. He changes in terms of power level and experience, but he stays true to the core of what makes him Yuji. He has the motivation and willingness to see this to the end, and I think that is way more important for a character like him if we're considering what makes a main character. His ability of what he can do may not make as much of a major shift like other characters in the series, but his conscious and unconscious mind is one with each other, and that makes him a person I aspire to be. This progression through stillness is shown through the manga, but in the Shibuya arc alone, I think we get to see this be tested for the first time, and in the end, he prevails on top of his mental battle. It all starts in his encounter with the grasshopper curse. He gets a glimpse of what he's getting into, that there are lives of innocents at stake here, and this will be a grueling battle if it means he lets these lives be taken advantage of. His fight with the grasshopper curse is not one that is on the top of the tier list in terms of fights in Shibuya, but it does show that Yuji is growing more powerful. He's able to beat the grasshopper curse in their conflict and continues through Shibuya taking down his enemies. The next big fight and one of the more important conflicts in Shibuya is Yuji versus Choso. This is one of the better choreographed fights in JJK, and I think it deserves that. This is a turning point in Shibuya after Yuji is defeated in battle. During the fight, Yuji strengthens his determination to do what he can in this incident. He doesn't care if he is the one in the end to resolve the conundrum and free Gojo from the prison room. This is the first time that the manga tells us that the world takes priority over Yuji, but it doesn't throw Yuji to the curb. Yuji tries his best to topple his opponent in battle, but Choso is a different beast when it comes to his powers. It would be difficult for a lot of people to defeat Choso, and for this reason, Yuji is left to rot in the bathrooms of Shibuya, like a druggie taking his final shot and passing out in the stall. At least, that was the case before Sukuna was summoned. By being force-fed fingers, Sukuna wakes up from his slumber and starts to wreak havoc on Shibuya. If you've seen the anime, I don't think I need to describe the amount of terror that Sukuna subjected the people of Shibuya to. It is the first time that we get to see why Sukuna is called the King of Curses. That title is not just for show, and through defeating Jogo with relative ease using his own technique, as well as bodying Mahoraga in their duel, Sukuna deserves the fear that he garners from his past history. The abyss that is left in Tokyo that day is important, but not for the sole reason of mass destruction and countless lives lost. Even though, that is very important, I wouldn't put that to the side as a tertiary point of the plot. I have compassion. After Sukuna's possession wears off, Yuji is given front row seats to the disaster that just occurred. It leaves him with many emotions. Disgust is something that washes over him, realizing that he is the one who has caused this. It's the natural reaction he gets from having known that this is where thousands of people used to live, and it's all gone as if it had never existed. After that wave of disgust, a feeling of raging anger flares up inside of him. He knows that he is the culprit for what would become the Shibuya incident, and he cannot go back in time to reverse what had just happened. He digs his fingers into the asphalt, trying to atone in any way, even if it means inflicting self-harm. It's uncontrollable in the short state that he is in, and he can only process all of this grief by breaking down right then and there in the moment. Yuji is confused about what emotions he should be feeling towards himself, towards others, and towards the world. After that raging anger, sadness consumes Yuji. He thinks about all the people whose lives he had let end. He's feeling the sadness of the thousands of families who had just been ripped apart or upended altogether. There's only so much you can feel at once though, so this feeling quickly goes away. What he turns to next is bearing this responsibility of having committed this act. If he were to just get up and walk away from everything, then that means he would never be able to make up for a mistake like this, even if it isn't possible in the slightest. Yuji walks back into Shibuya. He is still experiencing these emotions as he hobbles like a husk through the subway system. It looks like he is full of little to no hope, but he holds on to the feeling that he can make up for his mistakes and fulfill his mission of defeating these curses and freeing Gojo. That is when he sees one of his mentors, Nanami, die in front of him. This throws him into a complete fit that he unleashes onto Mahito through a flurry of fist fighting. He is taking his negative emotions, turning it into cursed energy as any sorcerer would, and uses it to deliver more powerful attacks during the fight. During the fight, you can still see that Yuji has still not lost sight of who he is though. He refuses to kill any more of the transfigured humans and opts for getting around the obstacles or taking the brunt of the hit. The fight with Mahito is one that has been coming for a long time. Through unusual circumstances, Nobara is brought into the fight and helps Yuji with dealing some damage to Mahito. This victory doesn't last long before Mahito takes Nobara's life, another one of Yuji's dear friends, in front of his eyes. From here on out, that last string of hope that Yuji had been holding on to snaps for a moment. Mahito delivers a ton of pain onto Yuji through his hands and words. Mahito was probably right that Yuji was not expecting this mission in Shibuya to go this way. He thought it might go the same as all the other missions, with majority success and triumph. The story of JJK leads with this idea, but does not conclude all encounters with this mentality. Oftentimes, through gaining something, the characters in the story lose something as well. It goes the other way as well though. When something is lost, the characters gain something important, whether it is motivation, an ally, or any sort of power. In this moment, Todo swoops in to save Yuji from his ultimate demise and helps Yuji come back from his depression. It's not immediate, however. Yuji still struggles with his psyche in processing how he'll ever be able to atone for his sins, but Todo ensures Yuji that he doesn't need to think about that right now. As sorcerers, they should be seeing out that their mission is completed. He tells Yuji to keep fighting if there's ever an enemy in sight. He doesn't need to find a way or reason he can fix everything he's he's destroyed, but for now to keep anything else from being taken away from him. That's what I understood from it, at least. You know me, Mr. Empath here. Yuji takes all the negative emotions he's been feeling up until now and lets it out. He goes into a deciding battle, truly dictating who wins between good and evil. Black flashes are sparking around every corner, and this fight is one of the most hype in the series. There is so much that happens in this one encounter, and it means so much to the characters in the fight for their development that it does well as the last major fight of the Shibuya incident. This is like if this was a UFC fight night, then Mahito versus Yuji and Todo would be the main card. This fight is full of victories, losses, insightful discovery, and tragic downfalls. Yuji, through all of this, still believes that he is doing what's right. He moves until he can't move anymore. He fights until he can no longer fight. He does what most people would deem impossible, delivering a black flash on command. It isn't because Yuji is at that power level, but because everything that has happened through the Shibuya incident has been building up inside of him, and in this exact moment, he's able to build up to and release a black flash if he decides that he wants to. It shows his masterful ability to take all of his negative emotions and let it go at once. His control over Divergent Fist is a showing of how he's unlocked his capability, and being able to predict an oncoming black flash is another way of showing that Yuji has developed tremendously across these past 3 hours, both in terms of his mind and physical ability involving Jujutsu. I think Yuji's ability to hold on to his beliefs, even if his hope does snap, to be able to grab back onto any scaffolding or hands being held out for him, and bring himself back up into the conflict at the moment is important for a main character. People don't like characters who can't stand back up from a disaster. It is the role of the main character to keep going despite the hardships that they may experience through their world. All of my favorite shows display this, whether it be a showcase of depression like A Silent Voice, or an intense traumatic drama like Violet Evergarden. These shows have amazing main characters like Yuji, who keep standing up and stay by their values even through discovering new things about their world or themselves. It's this unwavering motivation that people like Yuji become the main cast. They may not be the center of attention at all times, but they have attributes and traits about them that make them valuable and integral to a story's balance. Yuji's emotions were like a whirlpool during the running of the Shibuya incident, but after all is said and done and judgment is passed on from the higher-ups, Yuji will continue to move through the mud and walk the path that he believes is right. In this case, it is fulfilling his role in this conflict and defeating any curses that may be blocking his way. I believe that Yuji will be the one to complete and finish the major conflict in JJK. The point we're at in the manga right now leaves a lot of people wondering about how the ending will resolve itself, but I believe Yuji will play an essential part in defusing and defeating his enemies. He will play his role because it is the right thing he believes in. He doesn't want to regret anything by leaving this. He is seeing it through and continuing forward, even if, like many of us fans, he can't see the ending clearly. I think the message of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is drowned out by all the fighting and flashiness of the battles in the show. Yuji being able to move on despite everything that happened during that short night is amazing. I think Gege wants to write a story that is cool and throws the fans for a loop again and again, to the point that it collects this devoted fan base that reads every week. He wants to keep up the hype, and therefore I think it is up to the audience whether or not they take a message away from all of this. For me, I think that Gege is saying that it is okay to feel like a cog in the machine at times. As you're living out your days, going through the motions necessary to pay your rent or assert in your career, living like this is essential. Even when your life throws horrible things your way and you feel like you can't hold on to what you hold dear anymore, I think you should stick to your core values because they've gotten you this far, and if anything's going to change, you need to be there to make the change you want to see. Yuji is doing this in his story, and I believe you can do it in yours. In terms of where the manga's at, I think we'll see a satisfying ending to JJK overall. Whether or not it'll be happy isn't up to us, but I think Gege knows how to write an ending that will appease the majority of the fan base. I love Jujutsu Kaisen with all my heart, and I think it's because it's breaking new barriers for manga and anime. It's creating a new standard, and I think this is a great progression for society overall and storytelling as a medium. It makes me happy to be a Jujutsu Kaisen fan because it is a story that may seem dark at the surface level, but if you look hard enough, it isn't only deceitful. There is a glimmer of hope that shines through, and I think it will persevere to the end. If you've watched this far, I have to thank you. This is my first time undertaking such a huge project, and I think I like this form of storytelling. One that isn't long-winded, but thorough and lengthy, so that I can get all my thoughts out into the video. I think I'll continue to make videos like these, so if you enjoyed this, give the video a like and subscribe so you can be notified about any new videos I make. Feel free to comment any thoughts you have about Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, because I know after all my talking, you might have to give me a piece of your mind, or you might be realizing new things about this amazing story. free. Follow my socials and check out my second channel where I upload cut up videos of the live streams I do on this main channel in case you want to see more of me between every upload. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see all of you next time.